I see this is getting us nowhere. You forced my hand. Unless you tell me the answer to these 3 questions, I'm going to turn your potatoes into French fries. You've got 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. I'll tell you.
All right. 1, is the bomb live or defused? 2, what city was it mailed from? And 3, when will it go off?
Live from New York. It's Saturday night.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And I'm not.
Son of a bitch.
I'm part. I feel like I'm part of the show, guys.
Okay.
At least let me be part of the intro.
Oh,
Keep going.
yeah.
Brad, are you okay?
No,
going.
he's not. I'll answer for him. He's not. This week, we're talking about Season 2, Episode 20, with host Eric Idle and musical guests Alan Price and Neil Innes, backed by Howard Shore and his Bobby Blue Band. Also with special guest Jeanette Charles. This show originally aired on April 23rd, 1977. Thomas, we're happy to have you back on the show.
Hey guys, happy to be back. Consider myself like a third co-host.
I consider you my second co-host, my preferred co-host, Thomas.
Jeez, Brad's catching it already. I didn't mean for that to happen, Brad. But thank you, Gary. It's an honor, and I agree.
Always good to have Thomas Sena back with us. Brad, welcome to the show.
I was all prepared to start this week's show by admitting from the last time you were on, Thomas, that, you know, maybe Boz Scaggs is not that bad. I was driving tonight. Lido Shuffle. I was like, man, he should have played this tune on the radio when he was on the show. And then my wife made me change the channel. But I was all.
Your wife is not a Boz bud? Is that what you're saying?
My exact words, Thomas, to her were, "You are not a Boz bud, are you?"
Did she just look at you in disgust?
Yeah, she doesn't listen to the podcast. She didn't get the reference. But I'm not going to say any of that because, yeah, you two are apparently in cahoots. So great.
Yeah, we didn't miss it.
Oh, my God.
Well, Thomas is back. Eric Idle is back.
Yes.
This is all good as far as I'm concerned.
I was a little, after finishing it, I will admit, I was a little underwhelmed.
Okay.
No, there weren't like any Hall of Fame sketches or anything that like knocked me on my butt, but I think it was a pretty solid throughout. There weren't low lows or high highs. So maybe with Eric Idle, you expect more, but I can kind of gather what you're saying, Brad.
I think so. And I will say the more I rewatched it maybe 3 days ago, as I've sat and thought about it, I've enjoyed it more. Like, I feel like it's not so blatant, the comedy and what they're doing. And when you sit and think about it, it all resonates a little bit more. So I'm interested as we talk about it, what we all have to say.
I think it's an interesting show because it felt like this was very heavily influenced by Eric Idle and his sense of humor. Mm-hmm. And you could see that too in the selection of cast members who played in tonight's show. It's like, it's a pretty heavy Dan episode who totally is in line with Eric Idle's sensibilities.
Well, you can tell he's the one person, he said, the one member of Saturday Night Live who could have been a Python. Like, it's very evident this episode.
Yeah.
I think when maybe the first Idol episode that I did, one of us pointed that out. Like, man, Dan plays really well in British humor, like Eric Idle's humor. And you're right. In this episode, Dan was a highlight. Lorraine kind of stood out to me too.
Yeah.
After that, I think Lorraine had a pretty decent episode.
I agree with that. But Danny definitely was, fun Danny show.
But I agree with you. I was excited to get Eric Idle back.
Yeah.
He hadn't done much since his last appearance. His show had been on. Season 2, Rutland Television Weekend had been on and been off. And he's written in his book. You guys, by the way, have read his book since the last time we've done this, right?
Twice.
Of course.
We each read it on our own, and then I read it to Thomas over the phone.
Of course you two did.
Yeah. Thank you, Gary. You have a really soothing voice.
Thank you. I'm glad it put you to sleep.
Yeah. The second time around was better.
Look how jealous Brad is.
I am. I hate you. I hate you both. I'm just trying to say what Eric Idle had been up to since the last time we saw him, which was really just living in Dan Aykroyd's loft, writing the Ruddles, minus a trip to Mardi Gras. But it's great. I mean, it's another, we mentioned it with Elliot Gould last week, though. This is a nice, he's not there to like push anything. He doesn't have a movie or anything coming out. This is somebody the show loves and just wants to have back on. And you can feel that like with the cast and everybody. And so I think it's, again, like we'd already discussed, why I was excited to see Eric Idle back.
Well, I think we were all excited too. So should we just get into it?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. This week's Cold Open starts with Eric Idle as an English officer interrogating Billy, who is an Irish operative. And Billy won't talk and tries to insult the officer by calling him a slimy lime. And Idle corrects him. And then he threatens him with electric cables, which he then hooks up to potatoes, like literal potatoes. And he cranks an old school electric crank. And that doesn't get Bill. And then he threatens to French fry these potatoes unless he answers the 3 questions. Is the bomb live? What city did it come from? And when will it go off? And Bill answers, it is live from New York and Saturday night. So that's it. That was a very quick cold open. They organically worked the live from New York into the bit.
It was a funny way.
Yeah, it was different. It was interesting. Thomas, what were your thoughts?
I did like this. I was slow because watching this and watching Eric Idle and British humor when you're a little sick and a little foggy, it's kind of jarring at first. And so I thought that the potatoes were supposed to be like a dumb stand-in to represent like Bill's character's testicles. So I thought he was saying potatoes, like I'm going to do this to your potatoes, but then it was a visual gag that he was actually doing something to potatoes, and then I'm like, oh, Irish potatoes,
right? Got
it, Thomas. You were caught up now. So no, I think it made me appreciate it even more once my broke through my fog and actually understood what was going on. I think this was a nice way to start the show.
Yeah, not bad. I mean, it's so silly. The whole gag with the potatoes, I'm gonna electrocute your potatoes. Like, it's classic Python humor. Interesting, it's the second episode in a row where the host has the first line of the cold open. Elliot Gould did it last week. Eric Idle's got the first line this week. I thought that was kind of cool. And I agree. I think it was a fun way to incorporate Live from New York into the actual sketch and kind of make it feel organic. And Bill was decent, which it's sad that that's like something we have to point out. Like, Bill Murray was decent, but it just goes to show like the struggles he's been having up to this point. Yeah. But I enjoyed him. He was having fun, and I thought it set everything up for a good vibe.
He seemed looser in this, I think, than he has felt the last few weeks. Anyway,
yeah, I agree,
and I think that held for the whole episode, really, for him, where he just kind of felt okay. I'm just playing here with Eric Idle and.
Like, he was almost going to break once or twice. Like, he was like almost laughing. He was having so much fun.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And then for the monologue, we see a British flag hanging on home base. And Eric Idle comes down and he rolls out this red carpet and introduces the Queen of England.
Dressed in like a suit and top hat. Like, he's got
not the Queen, Eric Idle. Yes. Yes. Yes, he is. He's in a top hat with a bow tie. And he brings the Queen down. He jumps into the audience when he realizes she doesn't have a place to sit and throws an audience member off of their chair.
I like that.
And then he announces that the Queen is here. And he goes into a monologue about how different England is from America. They have 1,000 years of history. The United States has money. They have literature and poetry and buildings and green space and art. And the United States has money. So tonight they're doing a Save Great Britain telethon with the Queen there. The flag in the background and a board to track the money. Dan comes out as a Mountie for a Kick a Canadian as like a fundraiser piece. And the Queen knees Dan in the crotch. And then Idle kicks him. I mean, he doesn't really kick him, but it was good. I thought this was a fun monologue. Again, it was different. It was like a very Python-esque type of monologue or bit. And it ends up being our runner, which was fun.
You guys know who this lady who plays the Queen is?
Jeanette Charles, yeah.
Jeanette Charles, yeah. She's fascinates me. She made an entire career out of playing the Queen. She was in Naked Gun, if you remember. Yes. She was in European Vacation. She was in all sorts of other things, and she made an entire life and career out of looking resembling the Queen. When I watched Naked Gun, I had to do a double take when I was like a teenager. I'm like, is that? No, they didn't get the Queen, but it's like the resemblance is striking. Like, good for her for parlaying that.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the monologue, Brad?
Well, this is kind of what I was trying to allude to in the beginning. And, you mentioned this is a runner. I feel like this is more than a runner. Like looking back, I don't think I appreciated this monologue as much when I actually watched it the first time, but it's more than a runner because this whole episode really almost is like this telethon for Great Britain. Like it's so British heavy, and so many of the sketches and stuff that happens as I was watching it, I didn't connect the dots as much. And then as I sat back and thought about it more, and it all starts, with this monologue, which is, it's interesting and fun. It's completely different than anything we've seen up to this point, which I think is an amazing credit to the show and to Eric Idle to pull off. And it was really funny. I mean, I think at one point he calls Britain the ancient charity, and he admits that to all of us people in the United States that they invented the English language, like it started there.
Right.
Yeah, I love the comedic premise of Great Britain hitting up the U.S. for money, because we're cultured and we have the arts and we have this and that. We have 1,000 years of history, but you have the money, so we're going to need some of that. I just really like that premise. I love that this wasn't just a "Hi, I'm Eric Idle," yada 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 kind of monologue. It was a sketch. It was honestly like a sketch for a monologue.
Yeah.
Guys, this is what happens when you get a truly excellent host. Like that, you can take chances. Somebody who's comfortable hosting the show and doing comedy.
And I feel like he sets up literally, which again, I don't think we've seen up to this point. He sets up the next 90 minutes or 75 minutes of the show, because this telethon gag is a through line. It's more than just a runner.
Oh yeah. It's an entire premise, like Thomas said, that just runs throughout the show. It's excellent. We get our first commercial after that away from the telethon, and this is Lorraine to camera, or it starts with Lorraine to camera, and she is talking about the American Dope Growers Union, how you should look for the label made in the USA. And this is a play off of an actual commercial at the time.
The International Ladies Garment Workers Union.
That's it. Thank you.
And their commercials were the same exact thing with the pulling back and the group people singing. It's a spot on spoof.
There's a ton of writers and cast in this.
Everybody's
shot,
in this,
right?
The whole cast: Franken and Davis, Downey, Zweibel, Neil Levy, Schiller,
Beats. I saw Ann Beats in there.
Ann Beats, Rosie Schuster, Marilyn Suzanne Miller's in there.
Mm-hmm. A big night for the writers. This isn't the first time that we had a bunch of writers. Alan Zweibel had himself a night.
Yeah.
I
saw a lot of him tonight. But this was fun. I mean, it was quick commercial parody. It was spot on, like Brad, like you said. I thought it was good.
Short and sweet. Did the job.
Yeah.
And it was good. Yeah.
I wish I could hear the song more clearly, because the crowd was cheering and stuff, and I was trying to listen to the song, and I'm like, I bet I would pick up on the lyrics, or there was probably some sort of joke in the song that I wasn't quite picking up, because either like the audio wasn't good, and then the crowd was cheering over it. So I felt like it could have been better if you could actually hear the song. But I do like the idea. I did think it was a good premise,
and it was a good break. Right? If we're keeping the telethon theme, it was a good break before our next sketch, which was the Frost-Nixon interview. This time, Eric Idle is playing David Frost, and Danny comes back as Richard Nixon, of course. And he comes out, he does a nice little job with the walk again. And then it's just, Eric Idle sets it up as 20 hours of interviews with Richard Nixon. And he asks him about his childhood, and then Nixon just goes off talking about his mother getting him breakfast, his father sharing the breakfast, and he keeps going. I loved Eric Idle in this sketch. He just gives a face of total exasperation as he's talking about breakfast more and more. Like, wait, no. And then Gilda comes out as Julie Nixon to say, stop the tape. Eric Idle does this great thing of winking to the camera. Right. Stop the tape, boys. Stop the tape. And she tries to clean it all up. But the entire thing is Nixon talking about breakfast. It was fun. I mean, I thought this was a great Frost Nixon interview sketch, advertising 20 hours, and 18 and a half hours in, he's still talking about breakfast in a particular season in 1921. Thomas, what'd you think of this?
Oh, I loved it. Because I love Dan so much that this really won me over. But this was a perfect vehicle for him. Like the whole running thread about Dan's Nixon talking about those mundane things that everyone experienced. And he's talking about it like it's unique to him. So he's having to explain, like, my mother was preparing the meal that we called breakfast. That's what we call it in my house. It's breakfast. And so he was able to just land those lines, it was like perfect delivery by Dan. And Yeah, Gilda was great. Jane Curtin as Pat Nixon getting put to sleep. She and David Frost toward the end there were just like slumped on the chairs and put to sleep. But unlike them, like I didn't get bored. I could just watch Dan kind of be a wordsmith for a long time, and it just like always entertains me just to watch Dan do his thing. And I love the turnabout, like Eric Idle trying to rein in some of the stuff that's happening is a nice. He does that well, and I like that he can shift from being the chaos agent to like the one who's trying to rein stuff in.
He's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
They had that cool cutaway too, where they cut away to the sign, like we'll be back, whatever. And it's Eric Idle as David Frost holding up the sign. And they use that as a cutaway between like the two halves of the sketch, which is pretty cool.
Right. Because he asks him about Watergate, and then there's an audio issue where you just hear a beep.
A long beep.
My
very dogs were beep. Like so confused by this. I had to turn the volume down.
Well, former President, whilst we cut the tape and we're not on television or recording or anything, and just between you and me, you know, just for personal interest, as we have to talk for 20 hours together, were you in fact behind the Watergate?
Well, Johnny, to be perfectly honest and frank with you, and I'm most grateful for the money, just between you and me, man to man, as it were, I guess I can tell you that as far as the Watergate is concerned, I was completely...
I didn't love this one, I got to be honest. I thought it was fine. I didn't think there was anything exceptional in it. I mean, it's kind of what you expected from the two of them. And at first I was like, they're still hitting the Nixon well. But, you know, I realized why the Nixon interview at this point was a big deal. So it does make sense for him to bring it up. And Eric Idle's a great person to do David Frost. But just something about it, to me, never rose to what I wanted. And I thought it was going to be more. It was fine. And they were good. And I liked the end where they did the credit roll.
Yeah.
And everything was David Frost, written by David Frost, produced by David Frost, ideas by David Frost, wardrobe picked out by David Frost. Like, that was all funny. So, like, it was fine. I don't know. My expectations were, I think, maybe too high for this one.
Yeah.
I will say, as much as I loved it, and maybe because that's like I'm a Dan guy, I think the pacing could have been a little bit better. I think maybe it was oddly paced in some parts, but that's like the high wire act of Eric having to talk over Dan when he's going on and on. So, but I think there were some, as much as I love this, there were some weird pacing issues. Have you guys talked about David Frost much on your podcast?
Personally?
Literally, I believe the first time.
Okay, because he played a huge role in SNL. So he hosted That Was the Week That Was in the 60s in Britain. It was like a parody of the news and everything. And that was an inspiration for Weekend Update and SNL. And Herb Sargent took a lot of inspiration from that show. So David Frost and his comedic stylings actually played a huge part in the SNL that we actually still see today. So I think David Frost is like an interesting, not talked about, sort of invisible person in SNL's history.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. See, Gary, I told you it was worth bringing him back.
Do a little bit of research.
At least one of us does.
From there, we go back to our telethon, and we see that we're still at $20. We didn't mention that $20 was raised by Clive Davis just for mentioning his name. And that's where we're still at in the telethon. I did think it was interesting that Idol comes back and he no longer has the mustache on.
I saw that too. Yeah.
But really, then the telethon just intros Alan Price.
Certainly does. Alan Price. Am I the guy? Because I took up the mantle for Neil Sedaka.
Okay. My first note. This is right up Thomas's alley.
No.
He must be digging this.
And no, I knew you were going to say that. But you don't understand the nuances. Just because it's like a goofy white guy, that doesn't mean that I liked Alan Price. And the bow tie, he's trying to fool people with that bow tie. Because this was actually very boring.
Oh, no
Unlike
shit.
Neil Sedaka, who was having the time of his life. It's definitely not the same thing. I actually kind of figured you were gonna try to make that comparison, but I'm here to tell you that Neil Sedaka would blow Alan Price out of the water. Like, if you expected me to take up the mantle for this musical guest, it's not going to happen. I did not enjoy this, fellas.
Can we not gloss over the fact Alan Price is a founding member of the Animals? For Christ's sake.
That's weird,
right?
House of the Rising Sun. We got to get out of this place. It's My Life.
Yeah.
And then this guy shows up singing this song?
You know, every group has their black sheep. I think we found it for the animals.
He does have very nice hair.
Great hair.
Thank you.
Great hair. And there was a nice obligatory multi-TV effect that you had to do in the late 70s that kind of grabbed my attention for a split second. I mentioned the bow tie, but then he just started performing, man.
Then the guy just started singing for some reason.
He is backed by Howard Shore and the Bobby Blue Band. So all of the house band are they're dressed like bobbies, like police officers from Britain the entire night.
Can I ask an honest question?
Why?
Did you know that that's what a bobby was before you? Okay. Was I the only one who didn't know this? Thomas?
Yeah, I'm your British correspondent. I knew this.
God damn it. Okay.
As our British correspondent, of course, Thomas knows what a bobby is.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously. But yeah, this was not good, right?
No.
Okay. You are correct. It was
At least
not.
it was short. It was relatively short, honestly.
Yeah.
It wasn't like painful.
Yeah. No, it was pretty short. And it led us into a Gary Weiss film early in the night. And this is People in the Park, narrated by Eric Idle, talking about their body language. So it starts with Bill and Lorraine flirting and giving one another different signs on their interest. And then Eric Idle comes on as someone who has to find a restroom. And then it goes and it's all different people. A foreigner asking for directions to a restaurant, a drunk person, a stoned person. This was clearly not written by Gary Weiss.
No, this is written by Eric Idle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He said this, and the last one we saw, Drag Race, were both written by him, but with the WGA rules, he couldn't take credit, so he wasn't credited as a writer. But yeah, this is an Eric piece.
How'd you feel about it, Brad?
It was decent. I liked it. I liked the part at the end when they started getting to all the quick shots of people like drunk, stoned, klutz, hooker, loony, dead. Like they were all pretty good. I really liked the bit with who was it? Was that Niall Ennis who played it with Garrett when they're on Central Park South and he like runs out into like live traffic? Like they record it right on the curbside of live traffic and Garrett plays the insurance salesman.
Oh.
And Eric's dialogue is something like he can sense through the body language that this guy needs insurance or something. And Garrett runs up to him and then the guy runs off camera into what would have been traffic. And you hear like him getting hit by a cab or something. Like the fact they just shot that right up against the live traffic, I thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
They did a lot of guerrilla shooting back then at SNL.
Yeah.
Probably no permit involved in that. I really like Gilda as a prostitute. What they said about Gilda as a prostitute, I thought that was great. They said that her body language conveyed, "I am available for sophisticated sexual activity at a reasonable rate to be determined by mutual free exchange, open market bargaining." So I thought that was a really nice, really that's very British. And it's a very British kind of sentence to put on SNL, which I definitely appreciated. I like this. This was a good. Are we going to totally give Gary Weiss? Is this like a true Gary Weiss short?
I mean, it's credited at the end as a Weiss Idol production.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think this really starting to lay the groundwork for Ruddles because they both co-directed Ruddles together too. So it's like you can see them starting that relationship and building and going from there.
Yeah, I do think Gary Weiss has an eye for comedy. If people like Eric Idle are asking him to direct, I think there's something there. This is an example, guys. I talked about Lorraine having a good night. I think that she and Bill were cracking me up at the beginning. I loved Lorraine at the beginning.
You like that back and forth when they're sitting on the bench across from each other?
The whole back and forth. I thought Lorraine was great. And this is just another example. She also did that American Dope Growers Union. That was like a Lorraine-led
She carried
thing.
that one.
Yeah, she impressed me this episode. This was another example of why.
I thought she was decent in that back and forth, but what really sold is when she got up to walk away dejected, is when she really sold her piece in this film.
I liked how in this piece, it kind of showed her physical comedy. Like I feel like we talk often about Gilda being an amazing physical comedian, but I think Lorraine is underrated as a physical comedian too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, this was a fun Gary Weiss film, or Weiss Idol production, as it were. Which takes us then into Weekend Update. Jane announces they got a Pulitzer Prize, and then goes through a bunch of jokes about Groucho Marx and his assistant and Alex Haley and an iceberg and plastic surgeon joke that I really liked.
I had to look up the Wasserman test because I'm revealing a lot about myself. I don't know what that is, so I had to look it up. It's an antibody test for syphilis, which made the Idi Amin joke a little more funny.
That Idi Amin joke hit some nerves. I feel like it was kind of hit or miss for her.
Yeah, it didn't get a good. I think it was confusing for a lot of people.
apparently people in the audience back then couldn't stop and look up what that test was and get the reference.
Yeah, because they made them keep their smartphones in their cars. You can't take your phone into Studio AH.
Not in the 70s.
No.
Sons of bitches.
And then Bill comes on with an editorial.
Bill's back.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I mean, he did do a good job last week. I totally see why. Thomas, last week, Bill does his first appearance right at the desk and does a decent bit. So I could see him coming back.
You want to elaborate on what he does when he's back, Brad?
No, you do. I'm not going to do it well.
He comes back to do an editorial on there was a Supreme Court ruling on corporal punishment in schools. And he then goes on to talk about administering corporal punishment to a young girl in school. And then it kind of goes into his own personal psychological jungle.
I mean, it took a turn.
It took a few turns.
A serious turn.
It took a few turns, and none of them were in the right direction.
No, I mean, you'd never do this today.
No.
You would never do this bit today.
No.
And it started off great for me. I was seriously on the edge of my seat. Just like Bill was captivating me when he was talking about his childhood, getting picked on. And I was like thinking to myself, oh, I love this. But then it became weird. And I was like, I felt guilty for loving it because it became super weird. Some of the imagery at the end was tough.
Yes. Yeah, the little girl over the knee and it just gets kind of like.
It started off great though. Like he was so compelling.
Even the audience, even this 1977 audience, didn't really know if they should be laughing at this at some points.
But back to what we said at the beginning of the show, Bill felt more comfortable to camera in this editorial than I think he did even last week when he was at the desk. So he's getting better, I think, getting looser. It really is. I think he's just getting looser with the show, feeling more comfortable.
A little too comfortable.
Yeah, material aside, however you feel about it, Bill is very good in this piece. Like he delivers it well. He's funny. He's engaging. Like he's really good.
Yeah, I definitely appreciated what he was going for. I'll give him that, and that delivery was great. So again, the first half had me captivated on the edge of my seat. So props to Bill for that one.
Yeah, and then they pull out at the end of this sketch, and Jane is just. She looks so disturbed by what she just heard and witnessed. And then it goes to commercial for Oxon talking about Oxon. Don Pardo does a voiceover of why oil prices are so high because of all of these props that they have to make commercials. So they have like an oil rig as a prop and they need helicopters to film these commercials. And they have all of these actors who also need to be fed. Yeah. And that's the excuse for why energy prices are so high with the tagline, energy for a gullible America.
As far as update commercials go, I thought this was really good.
That's how I felt. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I expect something just totally not up my alley, just a throwaway, but I actually appreciated the premise of this. Like the rising cost of oil advertising is the reason why your energy costs more. That's a solid premise. And I think they did a good job. Like as far as commercials that you just throw into the middle of update, I think they did a good job on this one, honestly.
Brad, you made a face. I don't think you agree with us.
I mean, no, I buy what you're saying. And in hearing you explain it, I buy it more. Like, I agree. I thought the tag was funny. The energy for a gullible America was a funny tag. And that really made the piece work by the end. But leading up to it, I wasn't loving it until that point as much as you guys.
But I grade it like on a curve. So if this was an actual sketch, maybe less, but where it's placed,
it's a good point.
Then I have lower expectations. And so it's actually an enjoyable thing in between update segments.
Yeah, if you're going to break update up with something. Yeah, I hear you.
We come back then to update with Jane. She does a joke about Brezhnev.
That I thought was funny.
You like that one? I like that one.
Well, she's like, Brezhnev surprised the world this week and just stopped.
Yeah.
And then moved to the next joke. I thought that was one of her better jokes.
Yeah. It felt very much like a season 1 Chevy Chase line for Weekend Update. Yeah. A Mary Poppins joke. And then
that joke should have gotten a better laugh.
Yeah.
Mary Poppins' husband, Marty Poppins, and he's holding an umbrella in the rain. Like that should have gotten a laugh.
Yeah. I guess they're not baseball fans.
No. I don't know. By the end, Jane wasn't happy because one of those lines, she just took the paper and tossed it on the floor and moved on.
And then our friend Emily Latilla's back to talk about air solution. And then she doesn't get I don't know, like 2 lines into this, and then she just stops and calls herself out that it's not even her best work, but it doesn't matter because she's in love. So she referenced this a couple of weeks ago, I guess.
We did the cold open. They did the cold open a couple episodes ago with her and Jane in the locker room. Yeah.
Yes. And she talked about being in love. And now we find out that she's in love with Tom Snyder. And she sings, "I will swallow him," instead of "I will follow him."
It's funny when you say it, actually. It's funny.
Oh, thank you. That's it. I mean, it was a different Emily Latilla thing because she didn't call Jane a bitch.
Right.
Jane didn't get as angry as she normally did. It was short. And I was like, all right, it was fine. I never love Emily Latilla, but I didn't hate this one.
You took this one. You were okay with this one.
I was okay with this one.
I can't believe that I liked an Emily Latilla piece, honestly. Like this is maybe the best Emily Latilla that I've personally seen on Weekend Update. Because I like the premise that Emily does the confusion thing on purpose, and then she calls herself out on it. And she's like, solution, pollution. That wasn't my best joke. So it almost gets a little like breaking the fourth wall or meta or however you want to put it. So it kind of flipped the character a bit on its head. But then she still does the "I will swallow him" instead of "I will follow him." But I just like that beginning of like she kind of breaks character and she's like, yeah, that wasn't really my best one, was it? Like flip the character on its head. We don't need the same thing every time. So I actually find myself really enjoying this. And I never really thought that I would like an Emily Latilla. I kind of groaned when I saw Emily Latilla come on screen and she won me over. This little bit won me over.
2 peas in a pod over there. 2 of you. Okay.
Yeah.
This is good taste. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like how they tried to rework, we said, Gary, we've seen this how many times now. They reworked the whole Emily Latilla gag a little bit. And it was fun. It was fun to see it different this way. And then, she kind of ditches the whole, I'm confused bit to talk about how she's in love with Tom Snyder. And then when she starts singing the song, goes into that "I will swallow him." I actually thought it worked because you weren't expecting it. Like, because you felt like she had moved on from the confusion gag. And so when she brought it up, not as a report, but in this like song about love, I actually liked it. And the "Nevermind" worked really well. Because then she talked about "I will swallow him." And instead of turning to Jane, she goes, "And Tom, if you're listening, never mind." And I thought it was a good way to throw that in there.
Yeah, it was a strong Emily Latilla.
Yeah.
So that was good.
It was a decent update overall. It didn't feel very long. It felt like kind of a short update.
It was, yeah. It was a shorter update with 2 correspondents and a commercial. It was, not long at all. The next sketch felt kind of long to me at first.
Yeah.
The Heavyweight Championship. So this is NBC Sports presenting the Heavyweight Championship from Rockefeller. There's a small ring. Dan comes on as the announcer and introduces Eric Idle as Ray Grimwade and John as Muhammad Stallion.
Hey, John's on the show.
Right?
I know. I was like, oh, Brad's finally happy.
The first time we've seen him all night, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I don't think he was even in the Dope Growers thing.
Nope, it was not.
He was one of the few people missing from that. And then Bill comes on as the play-by-play man. Billy Lanova and Dan joins him as Danny Fontanelli. And they keep calling one another by their whole name. So Eric and John are in the ring with boxing gloves on and they're dancing around and they throw a few punches and then they were just one-liners.
Did you mention Eric's wearing the boxing trunks with a top hat on?
I did not.
Because he looks pretty hilarious.
No, and they both have bow ties on.
Bow ties, and he's got a top hat.
Yeah, and this was just like throwing one-liners back and forth, a couple of my wife jokes, and then it turns into a pie fight. This was one that left me wanting more, or maybe less, tonight.
Yeah, this is another one. This was written by Eric Idle with help from Zweibel. Zweibel was responsible for giving him a lot of the one-liners, but I think the premise and a lot of the heavy lifting writing-wise was from Eric. And it was just kind of, it was weird because they set the ring up and it's like they set it up as the boxing match, but like as you said, they're throwing back the one-liners back and forth, and I don't know, the concept was interesting, but I just don't know if they were able to like make it work.
Yeah, I think the name of the sketch, the Heavyweight Championship, was doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yes.
In this sketch, they were relying on that wordplay a little much. Bill and Danny actually kind of saved this sketch for me. They were the only 2 redeeming parts of this sketch. Their commentary was the most enjoyable thing to me in this sketch.
I agree. And it kind of felt like this was the first time I can remember the two of them playing off of one another so much, just the two of them. And I thought they were great together.
They were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it was one that was a little undercooked and could have used more time to figure out exactly how to make this work. But
yeah, at the beginning of this episode, I was saying that there weren't low lows. And this is an example, like maybe one of my least favorite things of the night, but it still wasn't terrible. Like I still enjoyed watching a lot of it. There was still something redeeming. So yeah, there was just something missing though, like to Gary's point. I think they just threw too many one-liners at the wall. There was too much.
Yeah.
There's too much. Could have used some editing.
Could be. Yeah, could be.
Well, if they did make a mess, they had time to clean it up because Dom Pardo introduces Nasty Ruddle for the British Telethon.
The Ruddle who lives at New York.
Yes, the Ruddle. That's right. I forgot. And he comes on and sings Cheese and Onions at a beautiful baby grand piano, all in white. This was fun. He did a great job.
That's a goddamn good John Lennon impression.
Yeah.
Like it is very. I read somewhere that I think back in the late 70s or something, this song got pawned off on bootlegs or something as a John Lennon tune. Like who people didn't know. Yeah,
that's the only thing that really stood out to me. The song itself was whatever, but I was just sitting there going like, damn, he does a great John Lennon.
Right?
I think I like this. Yeah. The song was, I don't know. There's not much to say about that, but Brad, you brought up like the best point of this.
Well, and it ties into the telethon. You know, again, if you look big picture, at the end of the day, you look back big picture, it plays really well as a telethon piece, right? I guess. And this is a song that they ended up like writing for the Ruddles proper, right? So it's something we're seeing before it actually is like in where it's supposed to be in. Like you're really seeing it out of context at this point, I guess. I feel like I'm over defending it because like my notes were like, it's fine. I had everything Thomas said, like it's a great John Lennon impression.
Yeah.
But I think it's when you get to the end of the episode and you look back, you see it as a piece to the whole. I think it works better than its own thing.
After that piece, we get Lorraine to camera on home base talking about the film industry in Britain. Again, this is tying back to the telethon theme, right? And she's talking about they are making the Battle of Britain movie. So then we go to the film, which is Jane and Gilda, and Jane gets a letter from Dan talking about those voiceovers. What?
I never tied it to the telethon until you said that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like a nice theme.
Mm-hmm.
So Gilda gets a letter from Dan in his English accent to her. And then the whole bit throughout the sketch is flashbacks to the night that they said goodbye. And it first starts with, I remember that night we said goodbye in the parlor. And then he's like, oh, you remember so-and-so. And Idol comes on and Bill, and they say goodbye. And then his whole what are they? The ground
crew.
Yeah, the ground crew. And you'll remember they were all there the night we said goodbye. I really enjoyed this because I just liked I liked that a couple of things stood out to me. One, this is a British officer. And instead of having Eric Idle, who is British, play that officer, Dan plays it. And the only line Eric Idle says in the whole thing is, hello.
All right.
Right? I like that.
I mean, you are correct. Yes.
Yeah. And then all the flashbacks go by. And then there's one part where Gilda's reading the letter and Dan's talking about the fighting that he's seen. And you hear all of the sound effects of the fighting. There's like guns, like, and her head's bobbing with all of the guns as she's reading it. And then John comes back on as Hermann Goering, the German officer, who was also there the night they said goodbye in the parlor.
Well, darling, guess what? I made it. The chaps in our fighter group did a smashing job. For every one of us, 20 of the Luftwaffe would come screaming out of the sky. Yes, I pulled through. I was lucky, unlike Binky and Tony.
I remember Binky and Tony. They were there that last night when we were in my quiet parlor, the night we said goodbye.
That's right, darling, they were. I took quite a bit of Nazi wing cannon fire myself. So much machine gun bullet that, in fact, the doctors at the airfield's makeshift hospital have had more or less to put me back together, as it were. Yes, darling, I got hit 5 times. But what are a few pounds of iron pins in my body compared with the tons of destroyed German aircraft? Old Hermann Goering is starting to get the message now. Darling, you do remember Hermann Goering. He, too, was with us that last night in your quiet parlor the night we said goodbye. Cynthia, darling, you know Binky, Tony.
Hello, Binky. Hello, Tony.
Hello. And, of course, my ground crew, Roger Lloyd, Wendell, and Hume. And Mr. Herman Garing.
Pleased to meet you.
Fräulein.
I don't believe you've met my cousin Violet. Violet, this is Herman Garing. Mr. Garing, Violet.
Fräulein.
Hello. Please refrain from stealing our art treasures.
So this whole convoluted sketch,
Good word.
which is
Yep.
just, her reading a letter from Dan, I really enjoyed the flashbacks and the absurdity of it, of having the entire ground crew there and Herman Garing there and the going back and forth. I thought it was a lot of fun. Thomas, what did you think?
I think it was a little long. I think that could have stood for some editing. I was kind of sitting there going like, okay. The pointless flashbacks were kind of funny. But I say that, and then, so it's that thing in comedy. It's like this cycle where like it's funny at first, and then it's not funny, but then it comes back around, then it's funny again.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's maybe what happened. So I think that's maybe I can justify the runtime that way, where you saw the cycle where the flashbacks went through that whole life cycle. I thought it was good. There was some good bits. That Gilda reading the gun sounds was good. At the end, Dan's walking.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that kind of gag. I liked seeing Al Franken, Alan Zweibel. But I thought this was okay. But I will say that it was probably a little too long.
Brad.
Before I get into this sketch, let me ask you guys a question. Do you feel the audience, the live audience, is into this episode? Because we mentioned it in Weekend Update. There's some Jane jokes we thought were funny, didn't hit. You mentioned, last sketch, they're not reacting. Because a lot of my notes in this sketch, this is my least favorite sketch probably of the night. I did not like this sketch at all. And I'll run through it. But there were points I thought were funny that did not get laughs. And as we're talking about, I'm just wondering, like, do you guys feel the audience at this point, do you think the audience is enjoying this episode?
I think it's oddly paced for the audience. It seems like it takes a while to get to the joke. There's weird pauses in a lot of these sketches. So I think just the pacing of it, the audience is just like waiting for like something more breakneck that's not actually happening. And I don't know if that's Eric Idle's style and maybe a British style, but I think you're right, Brad. Like I did notice that the audience wasn't really responding to a lot of this.
Well, and to that point, Python is a TV show. Like it's made for a television audience. So I'm wonder if, since so much of this feels so Eric Idle influenced, is that part of it? Like it plays better to the TV crowd than your live crowd there.
I mean, but I think that's the point of the show, right? It is a television show.
It is. We've been talking about the audience not connecting on stuff.
Yeah.
The last couple sketches. So like, I don't know. I like the set. I like it was like a new set that we hadn't seen. I thought it was a nice set they were on to start off complimentary.
I liked the wallpaper.
Gilda seemed like she's a nice lady. I like Gilda as a person,
fine.
and she was in this sketch.
But like my first instance, Jane walks in, and the first sketch or the first bit between the two of them, and they're talking for about a minute, and then Jane is like utterly surprised that she's carrying a letter in her hand. She's like, "Oh, I forgot I have this letter." I thought was fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
Dead quiet. Did not get a single chuckle out of the audience. And probably about two-thirds of the way through the sketch, I'm just like, what the hell is this sketch about? Because all these flashbacks are pointless, as you've said. They mean nothing. I yet again had my note, drop the cow now, drop the cow, drop the cow. Because I thought that's where this was going. It was just so pointless. I legitimately thought this sketch was leading up to a drop the cow bit. And again, Gary, you mentioned it. Gilda's reading the letter of Dan in battle. There's the gunfire. Her head is like bouncing around like blah, 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 blah. Hilarious. No laughs. Like the two funniest bits I thought in that sketch got zero laughs. And then John comes out, and by that point, I'm like, yeah, this has gone on way too long.
Yeah, Brad, to your point about it being, well, Gary said that the SNL's, it is a TV show, but I think part of that experience as a TV viewer is the studio audience's energy. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand. So if the studio audience lacks energy and they're not responding to things, that actually does affect me as a TV viewer. So I think the show ideally is wanting to get those laughs from the studio audience, because that bleeds over and creates that energy for the television viewer. So I think it's hard to talk about one without the other saying like, oh, we'd rather have the TV audience laugh. Like, no, I think the studio audience leads to a more enjoyable experience for the TV audience.
Sure. Yeah. I just think like the whole premise of going back in time, doing all of these flashbacks, like Brad said, if they're watching it live on monitors, they're watching on these really old, crappy monitors probably. And so the effects might not come through in the same way. And it probably just takes them out of it. And this pacing of the humor and the type of humor that Eric Idle brings is also not typical for what these audiences are used to seeing in person. So it's that in and of itself is kind of a different thing for them too, I think. But I don't know. I mean, I really liked this sketch. I laughed out loud at this sketch.
Did you really?
Certain times. Yeah. Like the whole head bobbing thing that we've all referenced.
That was hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah.
You like the pointless flashbacks? Like you thought they were funny and they worked? Okay.
I did. Because I thought it was funny that the whole ground crew was there and they just were like, hello. And yeah, I mean, I liked all of that pointless stuff.
Brad, I think the point of this sketch, it plays into the telethon. I think they were saying that whoever made this movie or whatever was operating on like a shoestring budget. So they were trying to illustrate that they didn't have a lot of like money to put into this. So that's why they needed donations, because this is what you'll get on a shoestring budget. I think that's what they were going for.
Again, another instance of like, you're watching it in the moment. You're not loving it. You sit back and let it marinate a little bit. And you're like, oh, fuck, this was a lot smarter than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Was the queen knitting smarter than you thought it was, Brad? Did you reflect upon this? We go back to the telethon.
No, I was torn
is
because
so bored she's just knitting.
I was thrown because with that wig he looked like Jack Burns, and I thought Eric Idle was playing Jack Burns. That's all I thought of.
Oh, poor Jack Burns. We still have only raised $20 for the Save Britain telethon. At this point, the queen, as I mentioned, is bored and she's knitting, and they introduce Neil Innes, who sings Shangri-La. This was an experience.
A lot of props. Do they use this many props in a lot of musical performances at this point in SNL?
No, they have not. Although my first note really was not about the props, but about his wardrobe, because he's wearing this like big sequin. I don't know, jumper. Yeah, I guess right. Yeah. With these fake ears that I didn't realize it. Like I was so distracted by the sparkles that I didn't notice the fake ears for a little bit. But he goes over, he starts singing in front of the house band. And really the only weird thing is his getup.
And this is where I finally got the Bobby house band reference.
Okay.
Because they had played behind, earlier. And so this is where it finally clicked to me of what the house band was doing and their integration into the whole British telethon bit.
Yeah. But he goes from singing in front of the house band and he walks over to the next set, which is his 3 background singers. And they have all of these cartoon-like props of English men in hats with umbrellas and briefcases.
Uh-huh.
And one is holding a moon.
Uh-huh.
And the other one has a bunch of flowers and a money sign. And they're dressed up like one's dressed up like a princess.
Sure.
And I don't know what the other one is. I forget. And the whole thing is, so Neil Innes is singing and then he walks over and they're like singing background and he'll take different props and pull them over to the side of the stage with the house band. Yeah. I mean, this is like the most intricate musical number we've seen since ABBA on the ship.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, what the hell is this song? It's like a fun, airy, like light song.
Was it fun?
No, I mean it like the sound of it, right? It's like a fun, like it's supposed to be a fun.
Yeah.
It's meant to be fun.
Yeah.
Right. And it's this absurd guy, right? Neil Innes, like we just saw him sing Cheese and Onions. He's one of the Ruddles and he's whatever. He's funny. Like he's a humorist. And I think this was so out there for a musical performance at SNL. I was utterly confused.
I mean, I had 3 notes. My first one is, what in the Sam hell is this? I have no idea what this is by the end, my last note.
I like how your notes, you write notes.
That I have no notes. My note is I have no fucking note. And then in the middle, like, this is so ridiculous, but it is amazing.
It's something. Yeah.
It is amazing to watch this thing happen.
It was more so an art installation rather than a song. Like, honestly, I thought the song was boring. but just it was weird, just interesting to see what they were doing with everything. Like I think maybe the props and everything was meant to distract you from like it was kind of a boring song. I don't know. I think the music tonight wasn't for me, but
no, I think it's supposed to be. Like this ended up being on a Ruddles or a Neil Innes album, I think, like 20 years later.
Ruddles reunion album.
Ruddle reunion. Okay, so they did end. So it's another like in that vein of the Ruddles,
but not until the 90s. Yeah,
but I mean, like of all the bad things we've seen, this was enjoyable. Like this wasn't even bad. This was just bizarre, but it like in a good way. Yeah. No,
I thought so. I agree with you on this one.
I don't know. I enjoyed not having any clue what the hell was going on.
Was this supposed to be a parody of like A Day in the Life? It kind of gave me those vibes. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but just kind of the melody a little bit and stuff. And yeah, so I was focused on, I guess I was focused on the right things and the wrong things. I don't know. I'm just as confused as you both were. And that's not a terrible thing, I suppose.
But I think we enjoyed it a little bit more than you seem to, Thomas.
Yeah,
just because the song wasn't hitting. I was just sitting there and going, you know what? This song's kind of boring me. And I'm almost kind of done looking at the props at this point.
Did you pause it and throw on some Boz Skaggs to just cleanse the palate?
I did the Lido Shuffle.
Yeah. There you go.
In my office.
Always a good time.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like the next sketch was a little palate cleanser too. It's a talk show called Plain Talk, hosted by Eric Idle. And Dan comes on as his guest. And it's a talk show where the two of them are just speaking to one another in a string of words that are just nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. What they're saying doesn't mean anything. But I just felt like, oh, these are two masters at this bit where they can like just talk and say nothing and keep you engaged. And
this is just the two of them showing off. And I mean that as a compliment. I mean that as a good thing. Like this is these guys showing what we can do because no other two people are pulling this off.
But tonight, sampan Bombay Bermuda in diphtheria, rustic macalpine splendor, rabbit and fut fooey jugs, rapidly big biro, rule liners, musky engages, micturate, with nipples and tiptoe rusting machinery rustically inclined. Good evening and welcome.
Hi.
Foreskin View Mount Everest Tin Tray, lobotomy in England.
Saddleback, luxury billboard, kettlebum, simpering, snuff, masticated, bozite, handset, lemonade, enterprisingly apartheid, rubberized, plum joint, curvaceously mucking squirrels.
I see. Rapidly piddlepot strumming, Hanover piece pudding, mouse rumpling, cuddly corridor cabinets, presumably.
Sick in a cup, door jam, whisper tap, Sunderland, shower curtain, nice wallpaper cups, gruntingly, rubber king, wrap, buttock, kissing feathers, definitely pheasantry, daughter successfully douche dinner bottom.
Yeah, this was a lot of work for a really simple, thin premise. But the fact that it's Eric and Dan doing it is what made the sketch. But otherwise, it was just super, just them doing a ton of heavy lifting for the simple premise that the show's called Plain Talk and they're speaking in the opposite of Plain Talk.
This was the sketch where I thought, oh, this is where Idol could see Dan Aykroyd as a member of Python. This just totally translated to that.
Does it surprise you to learn this is a sketch written by Eric and was on the very first episode of his Rutland show? I mean,
right.
And he played the interviewer on that. Like this is Eric Idle through and through. And like you said, he's like, let me show everybody how good Dan is. The one person who could pull this off with me. Because I feel like on a quote unquote normal episode, this would have been a fun detour. This sketch on its own.
I think at this point in the evening, this sketch was maybe a little bit of a chore to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I respected the wordsmithing of Eric and Dan and they're great performers. But at this placement, you're right, Brad, given what we have already seen up to this point, it did feel like a little bit of a chore to watch and sit through.
Yeah. I mean, I think it took me a minute to realize what was going on. And then once I realized it, I bought in. But I did have that second of like, I think to your point, I just watched this, I don't know what that was, Shangri-La thing. And now I'm watching this for a minute going, what the hell is this? It's in a long string of things where you're not totally sure what's happening, which probably took the audience out of it.
And I don't think that string is ending.
No, it's not.
Right?
I mean, at first you see a stewardess come on and it's Lorraine again talking on an intercom. And then she introduces herself as Sherry.
But she doesn't have the accent, right?
Right.
Yeah, she's missing. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, that was confusing.
Yes. at the beginning she didn't have it, and then I felt like when she introduced herself, then it clicked for me and Lorraine, where she was like, "Oh yeah."
Well, and she said in the previous sketches we've seen Sherry. She said she's an airline stewardess, so it all kind of like comes together. But until she threw the accent on, I did not realize it was Sherry.
Right.
So was I too quick to compliment Lorraine on this episode? Because that was probably a performance flub.
No, because I think she did well in this sketch. After it was just at the beginning where I was like, "Wait, what happened?"
No, or that's her character. Like when she's doing the spiel, she like is not Valley Girl Sherry. She's like a performer, and then
as a stewardess, you mean?
Not to give the sketch away yet. But then when the guns come out, her guard is down, and she's real Sherry. I feel like is the rationale behind it all. But as a viewer watching it, it took me a little while to try to piece it together.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I feel like then if you had just a quick interaction of her as Sherry with one of the passengers, and it's like, all right, excuse me, like I got to do this thing. And then she goes into the other character. But anyway, what happens is Eric Idle is sitting as one of the passengers, and he pulls out a gun and points it to her to stop talking. Which she does. And then Jane points a gun at her, and then John and Garrett come on and they point larger guns at her. And this is the entire cabin ends up pointing guns at her to do different things. And she just says, yes. And that's what the sketch was. And then they say, oh, aren't you the spokesperson? And she says, yeah. And they're like, well, do the thing. And she says, the tagline for the ads that she does apparently is, at Transeastern, we give you your own. Well, I think I wrote this wrong.
I think they wrote it wrong. I mean, I have two notes. Aside from pointing out that John's got a live dog on the airplane, my only other note is what in the fuck is going on here? And not in a good Shangri-La way. A legitimate what the hell is going on in this sketch kind of way.
I don't know. I kind of thought it was a funny premise. I think like the casual gun use and Lorraine's nonchalant reaction to it. Belushi had a great line. He said, "Is it okay if I smoke a joint again?" Like that cracked me up. I don't know. I appreciated the premise. I think it did go off the rails, and we kind of got it after 15 seconds, and it was a little thin, but it actually decent way to end the sketch. I never hold SNL or any other sketch comedy show to ending a sketch. I think the best way to end a sketch is just to end it. But they found a decent way to end it. I don't know. I was probably a little more positive on this one than it sounds like either of you.
I think you were. Got to be O'Donoghue, right?
Oh, I just thought the
sketch screams of O'Donoghue, right? Okay.
Yeah.
The gun use, Lorraine as the voice, like it's just all right. Yep. It's got to be.
I thought the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think O'Donoghue had any part of our next.
Wish he had bit. Honestly.
Wish you would have put him on the Titanic.
Yeah. Exactly.
We could have got Michael O'Donoghue on the case for this nonsense.
Jesus Christ. Once again, you got to be kidding me, this guy. Ugh.
I thought he was going to do one song. When Neil Innes was performing, I'm like, oh, cool. Alan Price only got one song tonight. And then
we got 4 songs. Jesus. 4 songs we got tonight.
I mean, Cheese and Onions is barely it's not
it's
very long. It's
still a song. It still counts.
It's not as long as the normal host song that they sing. It was a short song. But Alan Price comes on to sing in times like these.
I can't fathom Alan Price on this show. Can either of you figure out why Alan Price is a musical guest on this show?
Because he was in The Animals.
Yeah, Eric Idle.
Put him together with Eric Burden and do The Animals. That'd be better than this.
Oh, of course it would.
This is how much I dislike Alan Price and it was like not really paying attention. About halfway through this song, I legitimately wrote down the question, is this the same guy that sang the other song? Like, I thought this was Neil Innes playing a character because he has the same backup singers that Neil Innes used for Shangri-La. I legitimately for a minute paused and been like, maybe this is a character that Neil Innes is playing. But I was wrong. This is a legit guy.
Yes, this is legit Alan Price. Thomas, did you come around at all in this?
Well, my only thought was that this isn't good. But at least Alan Price seems to be mimicking fun in this one. Because the other one, he looked.
What does that mean? Mimicking fun?
It seems like he knew what to do there to maybe make it seem like the goal of this song was to have fun. The other one was just a bummer. But this one has maybe a little bit more of a vibe to it. It wasn't good at all. and then at the end he looked quite pleased with himself. And like, so I kind of
Well, they all do.
a
They
little
all
bad,
look
but he
that
just
way.
had the smirk on his face. But at least it seemed like he was trying to do something resembling fun in this song. If he had to be on SNL, I would have rather just him done this song and skip the other one. Like it's a low bar, but this song was the better of the two, and he should have only got one song.
I'll give you that, yeah. But yeah,
but it still sucked.
Yeah.
Whew.
Luckily, we don't have to hear him anymore tonight. We go back to the telethon, though, where Bill promises to chug a bottle of grape juice to help raise money for Britain. And he drinks maybe 4 sips, and then he just is like, I can't do it, and hands the bottle back to Eric.
He does a decent, he probably downs half of it. He does a decent job where you think he's going to go.
No. I think that was the whole bit, was that he didn't do that much. And then he's like, I can't do this.
Yeah, I liked his delivery right there.
Yeah. He has a very good Bill Murray delivery. He's like, I can't finish it.
Eric Idle's just like terrific. Like this. Okay. Yeah.
And that was it. And then we go back to the telethon. Now they have like a bank of phones out, and the whole cast is on for Goodnights. At the Goodnights, he says that they raised $35 million because Exxon bought the Queen.
And a vest.
John Belushi's vest. Yes. And now the whole cast is working the phone bank. And that's it. That's our show.
There's a really good interview I watched yesterday of Eric Idle and Alan Zweibel. Eric's interviewing Alan when his book came out. And they start and they tell the story where every time Eric ran into Alan Zweibel after this episode, Alan would give him $1 for the telethon. Like to this day, every time they run in, Alan Zweibel would give Eric Idle $1.
Wow. That's commitment to a bit.
I know, right?
That's good. That's good. That's funny. Thomas, what did you think of this episode overall?
I liked the episode. I thought it was like a good workman-like episode. It's like the highs weren't quite there, but neither were the lows. Yeah. I don't think. It was just sort of, we had a good host. Like Eric Idle's a fantastic host. And the material would have been much different, obviously, but an episode that had this feeling, it would have come across as much worse in a lesser host's hands. So I think Eric Idle's just presence made this good. And I'm not just saying that because Eric Idle's a friend of the pod either, and he's probably listening right now. So he's a fantastic host. I thought it was a good episode. Again, no, the highs weren't that high, the lows weren't that low. We got a good Gary Weiss movie, even though it was more of an Eric Idle penned one. And we got a good Emily Latella appearance. So that stood out to me.
That's true. Yeah.
That's fair.
Brad, what were your thoughts on the episode?
I don't know what to say. Like,
that's fine.
No, like when I turned this episode off, I just left feeling like underwhelmed. Like I wanted more, and I thought there would have been more. Like I was just expecting so much more. You know, the telethon gag was fun. It was a funny runner. You know, it was a really great monologue that carried well to the end. But like I said, as I thought about it more, and as we've talked about it, like I feel like I appreciate the episode more for what it was and what they did. Like I feel like what they did in this episode is something we haven't seen before, and I don't know how many times we see again. It's more than just a runner, like Thomas called it. Like it was like a thread that really pushed the show the whole time. And so I agree, there's not high highs, there's not low lows. And I feel like we kind of said this on Eric's first episode too, where you have to look at it as a whole. It's hard to just pinpoint highlights. It's the whole sum of the parts.
Sometimes in SNL, there are really good hosts, but the episode is still kind of whatever. And then there are less than, below average host, but the episode is really good. That can happen every now and then on SNL. And it's possible Eric Idle, obviously a capable host, obviously an excellent host, but maybe it's that, it's one of those things where we saw an excellent host turn in just like you left you wanting more. And that happens on SNL all the time.
Well, I think a lot of times that happen. It can happen if the cast just takes the foot off the gas, and they're like, "Oh, Eric Idle can do this. Like this is Eric Idle's show, so we don't need to like put too much thought or energy into this." Or the writers, same thing, right? And this show, I think, much like the other Eric Idle show, this show more so actually had so much Eric Idle sensibility to it. And so looking at it as a whole, because that's how Python was, right? Like those Python ran from one sketch to the other, and it was a thread the entire way through the show. So while this show wasn't as blatant as that, it used the telethon in the same manner and did tie to the telethon for the most part.
Yeah, I think it's weird too, because on one hand, like there are a couple sketches, the Dope Growers commercial parody, Frost Nixon, and then the Sherry sketch that feel very SNL. That's SNL's DNA, that the show is. And on the other hand, it feels like they made a very conscious choice to make a non-SNL show with the telethon and Python-esque. And it's almost like if they would have went, like, because there's no, like, it feels like they made, aside from Emily Latella, there's no Coneheads, there's no Samurai, there's no, like, quintessential SNL. So it's like they kind of were, like, straddling the line of, like, is it an SNL episode or is it an Eric Idle episode?
Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of leaves us a little bit on the fence. Like if they would have committed to an all telethon Eric Idle-esque type episode, I feel like you would have bought it hook, line, and sinker. But the fact that they broke away so many times to complete SNL world throws us off a bit.
I think we can all agree, though, that this show would be markedly better without any Alan Price performances.
100%. Gosh. I can't believe you. So you guys, or Brad, thought that I was going to stick up for these Alan Price performances.
100%, totally did.
I'm gonna have to teach you the nuances of like how to spot a funky white guy and how to just spot like a boring one in the 70s. There's a difference.
Okay.
In the 70s, you think Brad?
Yeah, I like how he
those
quantifies
differences
it
now.
in the
I
70s.
think Brad. No, I think you can spot it now. But I'm
You're
saying
wrong.
like
But
circa
that's very sweet of you.
1976, 77. It's
Forget it, he's rolling.
He's all hopped up on cough medicine. That's why.
jeez, yeah.
Well, Thomas, what were your best bits?
The Nixon interviews. I still gotta do the Nixon interviews. It was just because Dan, his just tangents and words and the little subtle things about just, I love the idea of him talking about trying to be relatable, I guess, or talking about childhood experiences that he thinks are unique, but he's explaining just like the mundane things that we all can relate to. Just something about that, and Dan's delivery was great. And then the first half of Bill Murray's correspondent piece on Update. Because that, honestly, like the first half still trended that way. It could have been an all-timer for me, for Bill Murray.
Until he brought it back to the little girl. Until he brought it back, right?
Yeah.
When he went back to his past and like, oh, Billy,
that was
and
great.
they call you. Yeah. Uh-huh.
That was amazing. Yeah. But then, we all know what happened.
Yeah. Brad, what were your best bits?
Man, only thing I picked was American Dope Growers parody. That's all when I turned the episode off, that's all and I felt like I was grasping at that one.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think this is one I just needed to sit and think about longer and appreciate it after the fact.
I liked the telethon bit, like as a runner, as the
it's a great answer.
Show.
Yeah,
I think
as the show.
Yeah, And then I also had the Battle of Britain. I liked that more than both of you did. I really liked that sketch with the flashbacks and just the absurdity of it. So all around, I liked this episode. I think all overall, minus the Alan Price stuff.
Oh yeah, hands down, you take Alan Price just out of the equation. Yes, doing that, it's still easy top half, if not top third of this season. Like it's fun to like. You're not going to watch this episode and be upset that you've watched it and been like, this was not enjoyable. Like you may not know what's going on, but it's still fun to watch. It's like this show is entertainment. This is quality entertainment right here. Yeah.
Yeah. Thomas, thanks for coming back, man. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, that was fun, guys. I know I'm battling. Thanks for putting up with me. I'm battling like some sort of illness or allergies. I more than likely it's allergies. But yeah, no, that was fun. I'm playing hurt, I guess.
Well, you did a hell of a job playing her.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for playing through with this.
Thank you.
Tell our listeners where they can find you and about your new podcast.
Absolutely. So I am a co-host of the SNL Hall of Fame podcast, and we are in the midst of season 5. The first handful of episodes of season 5, Adam Sandler Rachel Dratch, Pearl Jam, and Martin Short. So had great deal of fun with all those episodes. Had some great guests come on. You two are scheduled to be on for Lorraine Newman this season.
See. Yeah.
Oh, you're still not sure about that, Brad.
Well, we'll see if our schedules line up.
Well, I'm excited to have Gary Seath on for Lorraine Newman here in season 5. That's going to be a great episode.
Yes.
So SNL Hall of Fame, subscribe, look us up on Twitter. And I also have a relatively new podcast. It's been a great time. It's called Pop Culture 5. I co-host that with Jeremy Dove. We have over 20 episodes recorded, and I think we've hit a groove, and it feels really great. So we just recently released our episode on 5 essential Bruce Springsteen songs, which I know Brad had a lot of thoughts on.
It's a good one. I mean, it's good in general, but the Springsteen one's really good.
Yeah, we had a blast doing that. Our music ones seem to pop. We really love doing those. After that, it's the Office episodes and romantic comedies. So we basically take things in pop culture, and Jeremy and I choose 5 essentials. So like 5 essential Bruce Springsteen songs, 5 essential Office episodes, so on and so forth. So
Seinfeld episodes, Simpsons episodes,
yeah.
Scorsese movies, Tom Hanks. There's some really good stuff in there.
We tackled Beatles songs, which was quite the undertaking, but we're pretty proud of that episode. So go check that out. And yeah, we try to be eclectic in our choices for show topics. So if you don't like our topic this week, then stick around next week. It might be something more up your alley. So Pop Culture 5.
It's great. It's a lot of fun. Well, Thomas, thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, Look forward to having you back on again soon. Next week, we are talking about season 2, episode 21, with host Shelley Duvall and musical guest Joan Armatradon. Until then,
hooah!
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
The Not Ready for Primetime podcast is a 2 Pints Productions production. Produced and edited by Brad and Gary. Thought about by Brad and Gary. Please rate and review. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.